the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority.
To plough on regardless, and secondly, those of us here, the staff and the members and other people who are in the building, it is a train strike day, and some of us have a last train that's just after 5 o'clock, so it's not my intention that we use all of the time up until 5 o'clock. I'm planning to crack on, and while giving everything full due diligence that it requires, to also get home before our trains stop running. So with that in mind, I think we are about ready. I think, we're just waiting for, well, it is time. Is Ellie on her way?
She's on the way, yeah. She's in the building. Yeah.
Okay. What's our quorum? Can we start with 3? I think we can.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, we have 4, in fact. Although...
I'm not a member.
Yes, well, give me 5 seconds just to get my bits in order, and then we will make a start. Okay, right. I think we are ready. Can I welcome members, officers and the public here in the chamber or watching on the webcast to today's meeting of the Audit Panel. Please make sure your electronic devices are switched off or set to silent mode, including not buzzing, to avoid unnecessary disruptions this afternoon. And can I ask guests and members to position their microphones so they can be heard clearly, moving it closer to you by picking up from the base rather than from the microphone neck bit, which makes it become detached. Could I start then by asking our clerk, Paul Goodchild, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence today from Assembly Member Sheikh, and Assembly Member Baker is here as substitute. Also, Assembly Member Pigeon is joining as an observer today.
Yes, I was just going to say observer members will notice we have an observer. Assembly Member Pigeon, who I suspect might be participating as well as observing, which she is quite welcome to do. So, before we begin, I would like to welcome all of our guests who will be joining us at various points of today's meeting. 2 in the chamber, the rest remotely. So we have Janet Dawson, who's the Head of Government and Public Affairs Assurance at EY. We have Chloe Wilkinson, who is Audit Manager at EY. Excuse me. We have Enver, who is Acting Chief Finance Officer and Director of Group Finance and Performance at the GLA. We have David Esling, Head of Audit and Assurance at the GLA. We have Mark Woodley, Group Audit Lead from MOPAC. We have Vicky Hobart, Group Director of Public Health at GLA. We have Laura Haywood, Employee Relations Lead at the GLA. We have Carly Hudson, Director GLA Group Collaboration, and Rick Hewitt from TfL. And finally, I can only apologise for my cough. I'll make sure I keep muting my microphone. Ayo Akande, who's Assistant Director S&E for Delivery at the GLA. Welcome, everyone. We'll be introducing them at various points throughout this meeting. Can I just say to our guests, we have a couple of quick bits of housekeeping to rattle through before we get to the main part of the meeting. So, Item 2, Declarations of Interest. Can I ask the panel to note the recommendations set out at Item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare? Noted. Excellent. Item 3, membership of the panel. Can we note the membership and chairing arrangements as agreed by the London Assembly on the 4th of May 2023? This being the first meeting of the panel since then. Terms of reference. Can we note the committee's terms of reference as agreed by the London Assembly on the 4th of May 2023? Item 5, standing delegations of authority. Can we note the standing delegations of authority to me as chairman of the committee? I think it's a panel technically, as set out in the agenda. Noted. Excellent. Minutes 6, Chairman. Can we confirm minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of March 2023? 7, summary list of actions. Can we note the outstanding actions arising from the previous meetings of the audit panel? You're all going to say noted. I'm going to say noted, but can I note with some disgruntlement that some of these have been sitting there for months? And we don't meet that often. We only meet 4 times a year. So it's I think I'm entitled to feel a bit grumpy on behalf of the panel that half a year later, we're still looking at items. So we can do no more than note it, but I shall note it grumpily.
Noted.
Good. My grumpiness also noted. Which brings us to actually Item 8, our first main item. We are joined, it is the External Audit Planning Report. We are joined remotely by Janet Dawson, Head of Government and Public Services Assurance at EY, and Chloe Wilkinson, Audit Manager at EY. Please could you, if you are there, this sounds like a seance, doesn't it? Oh yes, here we are, they've appeared. Please could you introduce the GLA Indicative Audit Planning Report for the year ended 31st of March 2023?
I have never heard external audit compared to seance, so that's that's correct. Yeah, thank you very much. So what you have in front of you is our external audit plan for the financial year to the 31st of March 2023.
Oh no, I fear, if I may come in, I fear we're falling at the first fence of audio quality. I don't know whether there's...
Oh dear, is that any better?
Oh, that's dramatically better, thank you.
Okay. Excuse me while I hold my mic in front of my mouth then. So this is the audit plan for the financial year to the 31st of March 2023. And it sets out both our responsibilities as your external auditor in terms of the areas of work that we need to cover, and then also our consideration of where we see the audit risks in undertaking that work. So my intention would be just to bring your attention to the executive summary, which starts on your page and which sets out those key areas of risk as we see them.
Sorry for coming in again. I think it would be fair to say it's still not quite perfect. So I'm not quite sure. It was better for a while, and then it might not be the mic. I don't know whether I don't know what you can do, but speak maybe a bit slowly. So
I'll switch. Hang on. Let's see if that works.
If you have another microphone, that might be brilliant. Yeah. So I think you had we got to the point where you say, does anyone have any questions on your external audit report, or did you have a bit more to say?
Sorry, Chair. I think Janet was just going to talk through some of the risks. Can you hear me better?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, it looks like Janet might be here, but if not, then I can give it a go.
Shall we try that? Is that any better?
Oh, that's
Oh,
a
that's
lot
brilliant.
better, yeah.
Okay, good.
2 thumbs up.
Right. Let's try that again. On page 23, your page 23 of our report, we set out the key risks that we have identified in our planning work. And then we have identified where those sit within either GLA group or within the single entity. And we've also given you a bit of a RAG rating, which shows whether or not that's a risk that we've addressed in previous years, it's no change to the risk, or whether we changed the definition of the risk and therefore the work and the focus of the work that we intend to carry out in those pages. So rather than taking you through all of those, I mean, some of them are the familiar ones, such as the E20 stadium onerous contract provision, risk of error around investment property valuations, and some of the loans and investments that you have, which you will have seen in the past. A couple of new risks that we have included. One is around property classification, and that's specifically within your subsidiaries and to do with the activities that go on, and therefore the accounting treatment that's required as those activities take place. Sometimes changes the classification of property. You'll see we've included East Bank development provision in there due to some of the challenges around the financial sustainability of that, or the financial forecasts associated with that. And you'll also see valuation of investments held in funding London entities as a new area of risk that we are focusing on. There's been some changes around the classification of cash and cash equivalents within the group structure. So we need to have a closer look at that this year. And then there's the identified late last year around some sort of arrangement with both the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and then also the National Lottery, in terms of whether there's some transaction or contingent liability that we need to understand the nature of and get to the bottom of as well, as to whether or not you need some disclosure in your account. So those are the key areas of our report, and then the rest of it takes you through in detail how we're planning to address those and the materiality to which we're going to work. So on page 28, you'll see, on page 27, you'll see where we've set out the levels to which we'll be testing, that we think that readers would be interested if there were an error above those levels. And it's important that we just bring that to the committee's or the panel's attention so that you're aware of that. I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for switching, Mike. That was enormously better. Thank you. Just a quick one from me before I pass over to another member of the panel. Obviously, that we've had some difficulties over the last year or two in terms of timing, signing off of final end-of-year accounts. Presumably, would I be wildly optimistic in thinking that that's now all in the past and well behind us?
So what it does, Chair, is it gives us a really good platform for going into this year. So I think you're right, there were some significant technical issues that we had to address across the group. We have done that in the last year's audit, and so that gives us the platform to go forward. I think we're all very clear in terms of how we are expecting those various different elements of activities to be reported in the 22-23 accounts. We've also got a detailed plan across the group audit structure with timelines agreed, reporting timelines in place, so that each of those different components should be reporting into us so that we are able to meet the timetable that we set out in this plan, which is to be complete before the end of this year, this calendar year.
Excellent. So as we go through 22-23, we get to the end of it, and barring anything we don't yet know about, it should all be signed off on the expected timetable.
That's the plan.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Assembly Member Pigeon who has a question.
I've got a few, so I'm going to roll them in, if that's okay. Thank you for your report. The E20 issue, contract expenditure exceeding income, which is something that's been ongoing. Can you just clarify whether that affects GLA's credit rating? The pension issue that's in the report on pension valuations, I don't think it, but just if you could clarify, would any change in pension arrangements at TfL have an impact on this risk at all? And then I was really interested in the new area of focus around the National Lotteries contingent, which again you've just mentioned. contingent asset relating to the sale of land in the Olympic Park. This is the first I've heard of this. You know, I've been around since before the Olympics and Paralympics took place. How do we not know about this? Why has this only just come to your attention that we've got this potential liability? And perhaps you could explain that a bit more. And then a new area of focus for the GLA, which I don't see in here, is around green bonds, which the Mayor has talked about a lot. They're not launching them yet, but we know that there's no risk register associated with green bonds yet. We were told that last November. Are there any, have you looked at this at all, and is this going to be a new area of focus in the future?
Okay, shall I just take those one at a time? So actually, in terms of the onerous contract provision, that is the reflection of, as you say, the expenditure exceeding the income over the period of the contract that's in place. I think management would need to answer whether or not that affects the credit rating, because we're not reporting on the credit rating, we're reporting on how it should be reflected in the accounts for GLA Group. So I probably need to pass that one over to Enver. Pensions valuations, any change in TfL's arrangements don't affect GLA's pension arrangements. They're to do with your employees within GLA and the liability associated with their pension rights and contributions within the local government pension scheme. The potential contingent liability is a really interesting one, which is tucked back in some of the original funding structures and agreements between GLA, DCMS and National Lottery, as we understand it. And it is a structure that is predicated, an arrangement that is predicated on future sales of land achieving certain values. And given that actually over the period, we're getting to that, we're into that sales point at this stage, it hasn't ever been a liability that might crystallize. So that's as far as we know at the moment. We need to have a look at that and understand quite how that might play out and what the financial forecasts look like, and whether there is actually a constructive contractual arrangement in place or not. And then finally on green bonds, as you say, not launching at the moment, our understanding is therefore that we would look at that in terms of the financial sustainability of the organisation. It's one of the key mechanisms that GLA is looking at to be able to raise finance for certain activities, but it isn't in the financial statements that we are going to be reporting on at this point, but we are aware of it. So we would look at it in our broader VFM arrangements work. But it's not reflected in the financial statements on which we'll be giving an opinion at this point.
Thank you, Assemblymember Pigeon. Thank you, Janet. I don't know, I'm just looking, I can't see any other questions. In that case, thank you, Janet, and thank you, Chloe, for presenting the external audit plan for the coming year. Look forward to it. I'm sorry? Oh, I do apologise. Enver, you've raised your hand.
Yes, good afternoon, panel. Janet deferred one of the first point to me on the credit rating of E20. And I'm no credit rating expert, but the onerous contract's been in place for a number of years. And so therefore the GLA's credit rating and its group has already been predicated on that existing arrangement. So I wouldn't expect, there hasn't been anything that's actually changed as a result of that contract that would impact on the credit rating. So my response would be, I would not expect it to affect the credit rating at all.
Thank you, Enver. My apologies for missing your virtual hand. Fortunately, I have somebody next to me who can prod me when I do that. In that case, I will thank again Chloe and Janet for your answers to our questions, and can I ask the members of the panel to note the external auditor's GLA Group Audit Planning Report. Noted. Excellent. So that brings us to item 9, our internal audit reports, where we are joined by David Esling. Afternoon, David, who's Head of Audit and Assurance, and Mark Woodley. Afternoon, Mark, Group Audit Lead from MOPAC. So, David, if I could ask you to introduce each report, and then relevant officers can expand further as we go through.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll take you through the internal audit progress report and the annual report, and then Mark will take you through the specific reviews with the officers who are involved with those and present here. So I'll take you through the progress report. So this summarises the work that we have completed in the first quarter, of which it details the reviews that we've finalised in the public health unit, HR policies and procedures, and then follow-ups of adult education budget, and that's in particular to subcontractors, the follow-up of general ledger, follow-up of the audit budgetary control framework, and the follow-up of audit group collaboration programme. And also, we've covered the core growth hub grant funding to local enterprise partnerships. At draft report stage, so these are reports of work that we've also been undertaking this quarter. We've got GLA land and property, which includes land and assets, GLA payroll, and staff wellbeing follow-ups. And we will be bringing those reports to the next panel. Just to highlight on page 75, section 3, which is the counter-fraud work. There's National Fraud Initiative work that we've been involved with, and as it details there were 1,445 matches, and then of that there were 36 payroll-to-payroll matches, and these have been closed with no issues, so that's good. 11 matches remain open, which relate to matches between payroll and creditors' payment data, and we've requested data from GLA HR. And then there's also 1,398 creditor matches, which are the responsibility of TfL under the shared arrangement. And that so far, as you can see, they've closed 24 of those with no issue. And that work is continuing, and we will update the panel on the outcome of that work as it comes forward. We also details the work of an investigation into the agency worker, which we've referred to the panel in previous meetings. This now has moved forward to the professional body of the ACCA, who are investigating that on the work that we undertook here. So that is now going to a disciplinary with the ACCA on that particular individual. And finally, on the counter-fraud works, there's the investigation into the adult education budget provider who received an inadequate Ofsted inspection, and that's still ongoing. So that work is continuing with our counter-fraud people. We've documented a bit more of the outcome of that, but we will update the panel again accordingly. And in this quarter, we've completed 70 days of our planned 379 to date, and that's in accordance with our proposed work. Willing to take any questions on that, otherwise I can move on to the annual report. But yeah, before that, I'm happy to take any questions or observations.
Yeah, just quickly. So the AEB provider, they were rated inadequate, and then the issue seemed to be that they were fraudulently, is that the right word? Incorrectly, let's say, sort of backdating applications to before then, because the GLA ended its relationship with them, but they were enrolling students after, but claiming that they'd done it before. That was the issue, and we're confident that we're on top of that.
Yeah, we are at the moment, but that has identified obviously a risk with other providers. So there's a number of pieces of work that we are undertaking with our counter-fraud people, with the AEB, to look at providers. So it's an area that we've obviously identified because of this particular issue, but it's something we are aware of, and we are working, as I say, with the AEB on looking into this and the providers further to see if there's any other potential risks.
Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing about that. I don't see anyone indicating. I do see someone indicating. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Can I pick up something on the HR policies and procedures final report? Is that later? I'm just a bit confused on my.
Yes,
sorry.
Just
for people who aren't regular viewers, which I'm sure can be hardly anyone in this land. Within this item, we have a whole series of appendices, and we go through them one by one.
We are going to go through them.
We have a little mini presentation and then some questions on each one as we go. So we're currently on Appendix 1.
AEB. And
AEB is later, but I had an AEB question on this one.
Okay.
So my apologies for being confusing.
No. That's why I got thrown, because
Yep.
I was thinking I was following it, and then I thought
So
I will wait until the
So
right
this
moment.
is the GLA Internal Audit Progress Report, Appendix 1. Did I see you indicating? No, you were just moving. Okay, in that case, I think we can move to Appendix
Thank you.
2, which is the
Thank you,
GLA
Chair.
Internal Audit Annual Report.
Yeah, so this is the annual report that we are required to provide to each body that we audit, and in this case, obviously, the GLA. And this is based on the work that we've undertaken during the financial year 2022-23. I draw the panel's attention to page 81, which is the opinion that I'm required to give based on the work, internal audit work that we've undertaken. I have expanded that, as you will see on previous years, to give a bit more detail on how we've arrived at the adequate opinion. And I think it's fair, it's and proper for me to read that out. So, this is based on the GLA's framework of governance, risk management and management control, and we see that as effective. And audit testing has demonstrated that controls to be working in practice. Where weaknesses have been identified through internal audit review, we have worked with management to agree appropriate corrective actions and a timescale for improvement. And as I say, our overall opinion is that GLA has an adequate internal control environment, which is generally operating effectively. And now the rest of the report details the work that we've undertaken that has allowed me to arrive at that opinion. I think I'll just draw your attention to page 84, and this gives a breakdown of the reviews that we've undertaken and the ratings that they've been given. And as you will see, 4 received a substantial rating, of first-time reviews, and 5 adequate rating, and there's the percentages there, and also the follow-up reviews, 3 substantial and 7 adequate. I'll come into that a little bit later, where we would expect follow-up reviews to probably be higher on the substantial side of things, because that's, we've identified issues there, but that's something we can work on. The graph below that just sets out the differential from the previous year to the current year that this report refers to. As you will see, the substantial has improved 9% in 21-22, and now it's 44% in 22-23. And that's, the differential in the adequate is shown there. So they were more adequate for 21-22, but then that's offset with the substantial for 22-23. So I hope that makes sense. But that showed an upward trajectory of improvement. I think if you can go to page 86, and this sets out and touches on the counter-fraud activity that we've undertaken in that year. And these are all reviews and activity that we've reported to panels during the year. It touches on the national, or the NFI, National Fraud Initiative work, details that I've also touched on and updated just earlier. Then it talked about the agency staff issue that, again, we've just touched on. Also references the cyber attack that we had back in September 2022, and also the missing IT equipment, again, in the same period. And then there's a larger piece on the adult education budget issues that we, again, were asked to look into during that last year. And finally, I think page 89, so I just whiz down, and this gives a fuller breakdown of audit activity of planned days. I'd just like to draw the panel's attention to the counter-fraud days, so the area that's asterisk. So this was additional time that we were required to spend on counter-fraud activity. I think in the last panel, when we brought the plan for the current year, we'd shown that we've increased that contingency for fraud activity based on the experience that we've had, not only last year, but the previous year. So just to highlight there that we've given more contingency this year into this year's plan. So hopefully, and I say hopefully, the amount of counter-fraud activity will be contained within that contingency, and we won't go over as unfortunately occurred there. But predominantly that was for last year was due to the AUB investigations that we actually undertook. So that's my sort of preamble and overview of that review of internal audit work that we've undertaken in 22-23. Willing to take any questions that the panel have on that.
Excellent. Thanks, David, and thanks for a pretty comprehensive piece of work. What's one thing that that sort of stood out? So you've got 82% of recommendations for 22-23 were accepted, but then only 32% fully implemented by the time of follow-up. So how would I put it diplomatically? I'm not going to put it diplomatically. Is there a culture of nodding and smiling when recommendations are being made and then walking out of the room and people having no intention of doing them? Or is that unfair? Because that's a big gap. That's like half of them.
It is a big gap, and I was probably being more diplomatic when I said about the substantial. We'd expect on the follow-ups to be more substantial. I don't think I don't think it's culture. I think it's just in those particular reviews, and sometimes the recommendations are partly implemented. So I'd like to draw your attention to the partly implemented because there's more difficulty. So I think sometimes a time lapse there. From our perspective, if we felt that those recommendations, when we undertake the follow-up, haven't been undertaken, we will then undertake what we, for quite loosely term, a follow-up of a follow-up. So if we felt that was required, we would do that and obviously bring that to panel so that the panel are fully aware of the reasoning and from an internal audit perspective, why those recommendations haven't been fully implemented at the time of the initial follow-ups. As I say, we would undertake another follow-up, again, to inform the panel of the reasoning behind that. But going back to your question, I don't think there's a culture. It's just, I think those particular reviews, and sorry to jump in again, but I think that probably shows that from a planning perspective, so we do a risk-based audit plan, I think that demonstrates that we're probably looking at the right areas and sometimes the difficulty of implementing that.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I'm just too cynical.
No, well, you're talking to the wrong person.
I was going to say, in the world of audit, cynicism is a
exactly.
prized thing.
We're built on that.
Yes, it's highly valuable. I commend you for it. So I have indications for questions from Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. And that's I think it would be helpful to have that breakdown because I think in the paperwork, all I can see sort of the figures in a table, not really looking at the nuances of what those recommendations are, and sometimes they might be more difficult than others. I think that the other issue that was picked up on was about missing IT equipment at Union Street, and what actions have been taken since to mitigate. And I think on some of these issues also, so looking at the cyber attack as well, it talks in the report about the issues being identified and investigated, but nothing more further than that. So are these still under investigation? What are the outcomes as a result of that so far? Okay,
taking the missing IT equipment, unfortunately that was quite a base level where the door was left open, so it's very simplistic level, it was to keep the door shut. So although there was it was a little bit more in depth than that, but primarily the that classic physical control, once you then made sure that was well, I wouldn't say implemented because it was already there, but it was actually enforced, has prevented that. So that was, in very simplistic terms, is quite an easy one to fix. However, the difficulty then, it unravelled some of the issues with documenting equipment. So there was a bit of uncertainty, to put it politely, on the how much equipment was missing, and those numbers changed. But we were able to get to a point where I think it came down to 5. I'd have to look back on the actual figures, but I know we reported it back at the last panel. I think it's about 5 that actually were unable to be identified, but we were unable to, from the documentation, to know whether they'd actually been delivered also. So it was quite a difficult area, other than the physical control of keeping the door locked actually would make it life so much easier from that unknown element. And the documentation and looking at the invoices, that's improved. So again, that was an outcome of asset control.
Sorry, just going to probe you on that particular point. Please. So obviously keeping the door locked, but this is in a building that is pass card controlled, is it not? So
maybe something we'd want to take offline, but so there obviously is CCTV available. Again, it was still very difficult to identify who had access to that room. So that was our first port of call. Okay, the doors had been left open. Who had access to that room? It wasn't as we weren't able to identify that, and we were working with the facilities management people at Union Street to do that, and it was just very difficult. In fact, impossible to ascertain who was accessing that room, and because of the time period as well. So, unfortunately, because of the nature of it and the movement and flow of people around there, it was just nigh on impossible, unfortunately. Which, again, from our perspective, this needed to be controlled. Close the door. Access, it can only be open when somebody's in there who's got an IT pass. So he's part of the technology group staff, so that was all tightened up as a result of this. I could wax lyrical on this, but maybe something you'd want to take offline on that particular issue. Okay. So the cyber attack. So this goes back to. So the first part of the question is that's all been stopped. Okay, so we've nailed that down. It was an email that came in, and it was the classic sent to. We all received and click on the link. A member of the finance staff clicked on the link, and then it became more sophisticated because the way it moved up the chain in the attack perspective, they got a hit. Then they were able to lock the emails that were going out. So from finance perspective, the individual would see names of recipients, but those were spoof email addresses. So to use an example, it would be I think it would say somebody at GLA, but at GLAA sort of thing. So the names were correct; they were staff names. So you would look at it as we would do with any email. Okay, these are my colleagues. But we were able. The controls were such that the monies that they were trying to get through, that final control was able to prevent that. So in one respect, the internal controls were there, but unfortunately, with any email that you have a link that if somebody unfortunately clicks on it, it opens up a potential for activity from unscrupulous people. So I think it's the right way in public forum. But we have that has been nailed down. So yeah, to put your mind at rest there from a TG perspective.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think this is obviously a growing area of concern, isn't it? Fraud and not all of it is as simple as keeping a door locked.
No.
I don't see any other indications on Appendix 2, in which case shall we canter forward to Appendix 3?
I'll hand over to Mark to take you through those individual reports. Thank you.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. Okay, the first report is the audit of the Public Health Unit. We reviewed the effectiveness of the control framework in place for the GLA Group Public Health Unit shared service and examined the arrangements in place for the delivery of services and the mechanisms by which service performance is monitored by the GLA on behalf of the GLA Group. We also looked at the activities undertaken by the Public Health Unit, including working arrangements with partners, agreements and contracts, monitoring, budgetary control and reporting arrangements. We concluded there was a substantial assurance rating. One area for improvement was identified, and the recommendation linked to this area for improvement was accepted. We found that a governance framework is in place for the public health shared service arrangement with roles and responsibilities defined and allocated. Approval for the establishment of the shared service arrangement was obtained from the Mayor, and clear aims and objectives identified and reported to the relevant bodies. The expected benefits of the shared service have been identified and reported to the GLA Collaboration Board. Resources have been approved and regular monitoring takes place. Review meetings take place with shared service providers, and there is evidence in place of meetings taking place. There is effective oversight and reporting arrangements have been established and documented, including reporting to the GLA Assembly Health Committee, and bilateral meetings are held with the Deputy Mayors and the GLA functional bodies. There was one agreed action that benefits realisation for the Public Health Unit is continually identified, including building on benefits already identified, promotion, communication of the Public Health Unit and the delivery of services provided. Benefit realisations are planned to be reported to the Public Health Unit Forum on a quarterly basis. I think Vicky Hobart is here to answer any other questions as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And hello. Oh, yes, I see Vicky has appeared. Excellent. IT is working beautifully. I have an indication from Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you for that. And this is probably one for Vicky more than yourself, Mark, about that partially effective scoring on benefits realisation and what the Public Health Unit has to mitigate that.
Thank you, Krupesh. So the way in which, the benefits that we've said we're going to try to capture, and which relates back to the business case for setting up this new shared service for group organisations, which is based in the GLA, were about the advice that we're giving, the public health advice. So we're setting up mechanisms to track some of that activity, the resilience of the function in terms of the staff and the team. So I think having gone through a successful recruitment round, we can tick that box. Being more influential through governance networking, developing as a centre of excellence, and providing best value. So the mechanisms to report that in, we left it with the collaboration board that we would be able to bring back issues on an exception basis, particularly if there were blocks to achieving the sort of agreed strategic priorities across the forum. We obviously are reporting to the forum, as my colleague has described. The forum's meeting quarterly. We're getting very good engagement from forum members, and we're in discussion with them about interaction in between forum meetings. Within the GLA, we report already on a quarterly basis, and we're having the conversation with the committee about maybe bringing back another update at a future date. So I think the challenge for us is how we capture the range of benefits that we're contributing to, particularly across the range of policy areas that we work in, and then also the frequency with which we're able to provide updates for the relevant parts of the systems. So to the GLA as the host, to the partner organisations that pay into the shared service through the forum, as well as the collaboration board on an exception basis. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
I think it was. Having a nod from Assemblymember Harani, I think that makes sense. I was going to ask a similar question. Actually, I think you've covered it quite well. I don't see anybody else indicating. In that case, thank you very much. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Mark. If you want to move on to where are we? Appendix 4, HR policies and procedures.
Yeah. Okay. HR policies and procedures. We reviewed the HR policy and procedures across the GLA to establish whether each policy has been approved by senior management. There's effective consultation with stakeholders in place, and relevant legislation, equality, diversity and inclusion requirements have been addressed. We came to the conclusion that there was a substantial assurance rating and no areas of improvement were identified. We found there was a clearly defined policy engagement and delivery guide in place to provide direction and guidance on GLA policies, which People Function has followed when reviewing and developing its policies. Policy ownership, responsibilities, accountabilities and approvals are clearly set out during the policy review and development process. HR policies are discussed with stakeholders who are given an early notification of any policy review. HR policies and guidance have been reviewed and updated to ensure they are aligned with the Human Resources Shared Service Arrangement with Transport for London. Equality, diversity and inclusion considerations are included in all HR policies and procedures, and due diligence is undertaken to ensure compliance with the Equalities Act 2010. Finally, we found there was an effective process in place for the annual reporting on the development of HR policies. Laura Hayward from the People Function is here hopefully as well to answer any questions.
Yes, I see Laura online. Does anybody have any questions about the HR report? I have Assemblymember Harani.
I think in terms of the policies and procedures, I can see that everything sort of has the green light, and the policies and procedures are being followed correctly according to your audit. But is there any wider work happening on whether the actual move to the shared service is working for different departments and different parts of the group?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Harani. I can talk to that from the point of view of HR policies and casework, which is under my remit. So we have the new process is that All of our policies, as they were before, are available on the intranet for all staff to access. They then can contact the help desk, which is based in TfL, for any initial advice and guidance. And then if it's deemed that more detailed advice is needed, they're then allocated to my employee relations casework team, which is based in the GLA. And that is when a individual manager or staff member will have a casework advisor who will then give them detailed advice on the policy, how it should be applied in this situation, and all of the different considerations they may need to think about to ensure fairness and consistency. So to answer your question, we are monitoring and reviewing with our colleagues in TfL how that is working from the point of view of the level and type of queries that are going to the help desk, and then the type of policy queries that are coming to the casework team.
Okay, and is there sufficient capacity in that team to deal with what's coming in?
In the TfL team,
yes.
Assembly member?
Yeah.
Yes, based on the current data, and we have review meetings every month, the volume of the email volume and telephone has gone down significantly to that help desk team, as we're seeing that it embed.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you very much. I also have questions from Assembly Member Pigeon.
Yeah, I mean, it really follows up from that. Just to clarify, and it may be for our audit colleagues here, are you going to be doing a significant piece of work on the move to the shared service? Because this covers part of HR, but actually for the day-to-day member of staff in their everyday job, they would say that service is not delivering for them. There are staff who have not been paid. There are staff who've got gaps in their pay. We know from oversight last week, the admission that the workforce report, which helps us do our job of scrutiny, could not be published easily because there was a problem with the data transfer. So clearly are some serious issues that have come out as part of this. Yet, at face value, you're giving HR a glowing reference. So are you going to be doing some work on that? Because that is actually the thing, rather than our policies as such. Is that the area you're going to be doing some work on, please?
Yeah, we've just done a review of the payroll, GLA payroll, and the draft report's out at the moment for discussion with people in HR and finance at the moment. So we're covering that area within that audit. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get it to panel, so that one's ongoing. We're also doing a review of the establishment control management processes within HR as well. I don't think we've got any other HR audits planned other than those, but to say the big piece at the moment is the payroll review that we've just been doing, and we're going through discussions with the GLA at the moment on that report.
Okay, well, both of those may well come back perhaps less glowing than this, I would imagine. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I think that has been the view we've been getting elsewhere, the general lack of glow. But we look forward to more glow being added. So I don't see any more indication. Sorry, Assembly Member Fortune, did you indicate?
I was actually going to raise the point that Caroline raised from oversight last week. There was also something about mandatory training not being completed as well, but I think that might come up in the next review.
Yeah, well, sorry, the training issues come up in previous reports that we've done. Yeah, that has been an issue about the take-up. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember our philosophical discussion about the definition of mandatory training that is carried out by a minority of the people to whom it applies. Perhaps we shall return again to that another day, but it was an interesting discussion. I don't see now any more indications, so in that case, thank you very much, Laura. Thank you, David. If you want to move on to Appendix 5, the Adult Education Budget Final Follow-Up Report.
Okay, right, this is a follow-up audit. We reviewed the adult education budget subcontractors in July 2022 and concluded an adequate assurance level. 5 management actions were agreed to improve the management of the key risks identified with an agreed deadline of December 2022. Our conclusion was that there has been some improvement to the overall control framework, although since the original review, 5 of the recommendations have been partly implemented. An external assurance check certificate tracker is now in place to monitor ensure the receipt of all required external audit reports and certificates. Subcontracting checklist has been produced and was sent to all education budget providers who have subcontracting delivery. The outstanding actions include the following. The external audit assurance tracker needs to be reviewed and chase up procedures implemented for any outstanding certificates and audit reports to be submitted to the GLA. The external assurance tracker is updated by the adult education budget provider managers to confirm that a conflict of interest check has been undertaken prior to appointing a subcontractor. The external assurance tracker is updated to include confirmation by the adult education budget provider managers that contingency plans have been evidenced. And finally, adult education budget provider managers confirm on the external assurance tracker that signed contracts have been evidenced. I think the thing here is that the tracker's been put in place, and the other tracker as well, the two trackers. But there's an issue about embedding that process and just ensuring that the certificates have actually been received. That's why they're all partly. Yeah. Okay. I think AO is here
yes,
to
I can
answer
see AO. He's
questions.
He's on the big screen. I don't have any indications on that. No, I was just going to quickly ask then. So there were I think 5 management actions in the original audit. They were delivered on time and in full. Is that right?
No, they were all partly.
Oh, they were all parts. So the original ones were all.
Yeah, there were 5. There are 5
partly.
agreed
I
actions.
apologise.
5 of which, the process has begun on those, implementing those, but there's still a few steps to be followed to make sure that they're fully implemented.
And you're happy that that's proceeding. Perhaps that should be a question for AO. You're happy that you're getting there on all 5 of those?
Yeah, it might be what, good afternoon, Chair and panel members, it might be what, just to clarify, when we say partly, that's because we are accepting the recommendation from the follow-up that there is more that we can do. And since the audit as well, Mark, I've got confirmation from senior officers that a few of these actions actually be completed. So by the time of a follow-up on the process, we will hopefully have seen a great improvement and possibly completion as per the recommendation.
Thank you. That's good news that actually there's further update since I suppose the date of the report. So I don't see. Assembly Member Fortune.
This is perhaps one for Enver. In terms of green budgeting, how will the subcontractors be captured under the new proposals for the green budget? The AEB subcontractors.
Yeah, hi. It's not on my radar, if I'm totally honest with you. I mean, I'd love to say yes, but I'm focusing at the moment on the public sector organisations in London, and in an ideal world, we'll eventually cover all private sector and third sector across London as well. But I'd be lying if I said to you that it's on my immediate radar. It's not.
No, that doesn't surprise me. I just wondered if it was, what work was being done to prepare them, because it's quite substantial.
I mean, unless AO has got any ideas to help me with that, that would be great. But
well shifted, Enver. That was excellent.
I haven't picked up on it yet.
We can have it outside of this conversation, Enver. But again, same as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Member Fortune. No, that's a good point about the green budgeting. Obviously, it's filtering down through us as an organisation, but pushing it out the next step to subcontracted organisations, of which there are many, is quite a big additional piece of work, which perhaps beyond the scope of this appendix. Since I don't now definitely see any more indications, thank you very much, AO. Thank you, Mark, for that item. So I have Appendix 6, General Ledger Final Follow-Up Report.
Okay, right, this is a follow-up audit. We reviewed the General Ledger in December 2022 and concluded an adequate assurance level. 4 management actions were agreed to improve the management of key risks identified, with an agreed deadline for implementation of January 2023. We found that the overall control framework had improved, and since the original review, 3 recommendations had been fully implemented and 1 had been partly implemented. We found that requests for new SAP users submitted to GLA Finance Services were found to be adequately authorised, and records showing approvals were in place. We also reviewed a sample of journal transactions and found that details of the staff preparing and authorising the journal were clearly recorded, and supporting information was included for all journals reviewed. We also found there was an improvement in the SME payments made within 10 days from 62% in Q4 2022-23 to 84% in Q1 for this current financial year. Reports are now circulated to senior managers and the Mayor, and will form part of the finance business partner meetings with budget holders to move performance to the 90% target. The one partly implemented action referred to the fact that signed evidence of the person preparing suspense account reconciliations was recorded. However, reconciliations had not been signed off by the approver. It's been agreed with Finance Services that the reconciliations will be signed and dated by the officer in approving the reconciliations. I think Enver's here to ask any other questions.
He has revealed himself unto us already, so that's good news. I suppose it's the usual story where when there are no questions in the world of audit, that is probably good. I mean, to me, this all seems like a good picture of problems being, things being adequate and problems that were previously addressed being picked up. I don't see anybody else with any questions. Oh, Assembly Member Fortune has a question.
Sorry.
So, can I just say, there was a real disappointed note to my voice there. It was not deliberate.
I love you too.
Fortune. Please share your question.
The payments to small businesses has been of a particular note, and you'll know I've been chasing that up with the Mayor's office as well. What's changed to start progressing that towards the target of 90%?
I think part of it is this. There's a bit more reporting going on and reminders of people of their responsibilities. And as I say, part of this finance business partner meetings that they have with the budget holders seems to have had an improvement in that area. I think so. There's a general increased acknowledgement of the fact that those payments need to be made in time. Don't know whether Enver has anything else to add to that.
I meet with our commercial partner from TfL weekly, and this item is on the weekly agenda, Assembly members. I think the latest figures we've got now is they're somewhere between 87 and 88%, which is definitely a good step in the right direction. There's still more to be done, and it's about ensuring that people are chased and reminded, and that approvals aren't taking too long on the system. If there's any glitches with SAP, that people are raising issues and getting things unblocked as quick as they can. But it is something that's now being dealt with on a day-by-day basis, so we can only see through time that it gets back to the 90%, but it's definitely high on the radar.
So there's the old cliche, isn't there, that which gets measured gets done. So it's making sure we're measuring all the right stuff then, I guess. Sorry, Enver, I don't know which television to look at to see you. But, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Fortune. And actually, that was an excellent question, which I know has been brought up at Mayor's Question Time, and is a very important issue for small businesses wanting to be paid promptly. And I think it's a good example of Assembly members making a rumpus and seeing some positive results for Londoners. So on that positive note, shall we move on to Appendix 7, which is Budgetary Control Framework Final Follow-Up Report?
Okay. We reviewed the budgetary control framework in May 2022 and concluded an adequate assurance. 6 management actions were agreed to improve the management of the key risks identified with an agreed deadline of March 2023. Since our original audit, there's been a restructure of financial services, and discussions have been ongoing to examine ways in which the budget scrutiny process can be strengthened and the support provided to Assembly members can be further improved. We concluded that the overall control framework for budgetary control had improved, with since the original review, 2 agreed actions had been fully implemented and 4 had been partly implemented. Of those that have been implemented, the revised GLA financial regulations were approved by the Mayor in April 2022. An assessment selection process for management, accountant staff took place as part of the restructure of finance services. Specific training requirements are identified, and a new financial services training policy has been established. The requirement to be a CCAB qualified accountant to hold a role at grade 10 or above has been established. The monthly corporate management team budget scrutiny process has been embedded, and it is planned for a more focused dashboard approach to be adopted going into 2022, 2023-24. The revised process for the identification of underspends and carry forwards, as set out in the revised GLA financial regulations, has been implemented. The actions arising from discussions on the lessons learned from the 2023-24 budget setting process are due to be agreed with the Budget and Performance Committee members and incorporated into the 2024-25 process. A more substantive review of the overall approach to budget scrutiny is due to begin following the appointment within the Secretariat of a new Head of Financial Scrutiny. The Head of Financial Scrutiny will be supporting the efforts already made by Finance to increase the amount of information and training provided to members. Financial scrutiny will be incorporated as a specific part of the induction programme for new Assembly members following the 2024 GLA elections. And Assembly members will be surveyed in line with the Centre for Public Scrutiny and SIP for Financial Scrutiny Practice Guide to identify whether the financial information they receive is adequate and whether there are any further training requirements. Refresher training is to be provided to new Budget Performance Committee members. One sort of outstanding area was that a review of the skills and competencies of budget holders has not taken place, and the budget management objective has not been considered for incorporation into budget holders' performance plans. I think Enver's here as well to ask any other questions as well.
Excellent. I mean, you've sort of partly covered it. So recommendation 3, or action 3 rather, was to do with Assembly members training and surveying what we know. And that's only been partly implemented. I suppose I would just make the obvious point that that ship has probably sailed. We have an election coming up in a few months' time. It's probably, I mean, I think you said this, but presumably the plan is essentially to start that afresh with the fresh batch of Assembly members, some of whom may look more or less fresh than others, from May next year, so that we start that new Assembly term with a survey of what they understand, especially the people who are sitting on this committee or on the budget performance, and then the training to make sure they can understand the information being given. Is that what I correctly inferred from what you said?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Yeah, what I don't understand is, this is such an important area, why there are so many really outstanding actions or things that have only partially been implemented, and why, when we're just about to start a new year, looking at the budget in terms of financial terms, why you've decided actually we'll just leave any training and other stuff until the new term. You know, I've been here 15 years. I've not once had any financial training, despite requesting it at times, or any other training provided. Yet we're carrying out a really important role. So why do you think, oh, let's just leave it for this year and we'll wait till the new term?
Well, that's why they're down as partly implemented. I suppose Enver might be able to cast a bit more light as to why those things didn't take place sooner.
Haven't taken place and don't plan to take place for another year at least. Enver?
The training requirement, I was happy for us to do training straight away. We had to work with the executive director of the Secretariat, who was going to work with Assembly members to tell us what specific training was needed, because at the time when the audit was done, we weren't clear whether we were talking about the sort of specifics that are done within the GLA, whether it was the overall group budget, so that we could cater the training for what Assembly members needed. We had to wait for a little while, to say the least, to be advised of this. So I didn't say that we won't do the training until the next term. If training is required, and if people want training, we can facilitate that.
I think as part of the new process, it would be really helpful. We're trying to have a new process over the next year. To be honest, the budget committee briefing that we received last week, which was in a slightly different format, I was looking at the numbers thinking these don't make sense. I asked my husband, who's a management accountant, who said how that's been set out is absolute nonsense. So I think it might be helpful for finance to be helping our officers to make sure we've got the information in the right format so we're able to do our job. And if there is a training session, particularly as part of our new way of doing the budget stuff over the next year, I certainly would welcome it.
Yeah, perhaps I was just unduly pessimistic in thinking that any process that starts now could not possibly achieve anything by May, but maybe that's because I spent too much time in this building and my expectations have been beaten so low. I think I'm right in saying that I don't think anybody has asked me since I got here in 2021 what skills I have or think I have on anything, finance or anything else. Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you, Chair. I think you're both right in a way. So, Assemblymember Garrett, I think you're right in terms of having this as part of a process that members go through post-elections. But I think there's a separate point made about budget holders, which can be implemented now because they're not impacted by elections or results of elections. So I'm just struggling on that part, why that's only partly implemented, and the budget holders within the organisation are not having that training immediately because they can benefit from the budget setting process from today.
Shall I come back in on that?
Yes. If you could come back on that, Enver.
Yes, of course. The budget holders work with the finance business partners, and so I think sometimes you can look at a committee or an audit report and it's partly implemented, but it doesn't mean it isn't actually. The recommendation and the risk is still being addressed slightly through a different form of action. It doesn't always have to be implemented exactly in the way that our audit colleagues have put in an action plan. And if finance business partners work with budget holders, you don't necessarily have to attend a formal training session to say that they've been trained, because the finance business partners will work with them to help them manage their budgets. I think the area that we want to focus on is making the requirement that they adhere to it into their personal objectives as well. But there's a number of things being reviewed in the competency framework, which we waited for until recently for that to be reviewed, which includes things like leadership, an objective around leadership, an objective around EDI, and now we're looking at putting in an extra compulsory objective around budget holders adhering to managing their budgets. And so September's only around the corner, so we are on that. It's just, I don't think it would land very well if we tried to do it in August. So September is the next practical date for that. But we did have to wait till we had the right competency in the finance team as well, so that they could train budget holders. And so that's not happening in a training room, it's happening on a sort of a bilateral working basis.
But is this not a move deadline? So was this work not supposed to be completed in March?
It might have done, but now that I've picked up on it, it will be done in this new date.
It might be, I'm not sure what you were hinting at there, Enver, but I do believe that in March, you were not the holder of the post that had this responsibility. Is that what you're suggesting to us? But now that you are, you're getting a firm grip of it with both hands, and it's moving forward with alacrity.
Yeah, and there's other priorities at March as well with end of year and stuff, so we will be picking it up.
So did you have a... I think... Okay, I would just make an observation on that though, and I don't know whether our audit colleagues have a thought on it. My observation would be that if the view of the bit of the organisation having an audit recommendation is we don't really quite agree with what they're recommending, we think we can do that thing, it's an important thing, but we think we should do it in a different way, then I would rather you reject the recommendation and then come and tell us why, rather than accept the recommendation and then come back later on and say, well, we haven't done that, but that's because we've done a different thing. And this sort of hints back at or with our cynical goggles on, and the number of, 82% accepted and 32% completed. So I think that's a wider point rather than specifically on this, but I think is that where you were getting at, Assemblymember Harani? Yeah, so I think we perhaps have some agreement on that. Okay, specifically on that though, are there any other questions? No? Okay, in that case, I think that takes us to Appendix 8, Group Collaboration Programme Final Follow-Up Report.
Okay, we reviewed the GLA Group Collaboration Programme in June 2022 and concluded the control framework was adequately designed to manage key risks. 3 management actions were agreed to improve the management of the key risks identified. We concluded there had been some improvement in the overall control framework, and since the original review, 3 agreed actions had been partly implemented and work was underway to fully implement the outstanding actions. A risk tracker template for all projects has been developed and will be updated and reviewed quarterly. The top 3 risks of each project are now updated monthly and reported to the Group Collaboration Board, and work is underway to collate the information from the risk trackers into a centralised risk register. The benefits management system has not been fully implemented, but a benefits management plan has been developed, which is linked to the payback principles and processes. The benefit management system will be fully implemented once all the project's benefit management plans have been fully established. Benefits are due to be calculated on a project-by-project basis. For projects where there is no immediate financial benefit, non-cashable benefits will be identified. The collaboration team will review the methodology for determining cashable benefits, and a report on the team's findings will be produced for the Group Collaboration Board to consider before the December 2023 meeting. I think Charlie Hudson and Rick Hewitt hopefully are here to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much. Do I have any indications from other members on this item? I don't think so. I suppose we have the partially implemented recommendations question again, and where are we with those, and what actions being taken on the 3 partially implemented recommendations? I'm not quite sure. Charlie or Rick, who would prefer to?
Thank you, Chair. I am new to the GLA. I'm in my 2nd month, so I'll have a go at answering in general terms, and Rick may want to come in with a bit more detail. So I think it's fair to say that the benefits area is an area that the board, as well as the audit, are very much keen to continue to develop and refine. And so we are doing, as the report suggests, a full retrospective of where we've got to now, and a checking that the forecast forward of benefits are accurate and can be clearly understood, so that we can start to validate those numbers and start to roll them forward as we get into the kind of payback period. So I'm grateful that this has been identified in the internal audit report, because it's certainly something that the Collaboration Board are very keen to continue to progress.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlie, and welcome to the GLA and welcome to the audit panel.
Thank you.
Did anybody else have any other? Okay, no, I don't think we have any further questions actually then on Appendix 8. Thank you, Charlie and Rick. Thank you, Mark. I think that takes us to Appendix 9, which is the 2022-23 Core Growth Hub grant funding to local enterprise partnerships.
Okay, this is slightly different. This isn't a systems audit. This is just a piece of work that we carry out every year. The London Economic Action Partnership brings in entrepreneurs and businesses together with the Mayoralty and London councils to identify strategic actions to support and lead economic growth and job creation in the capital. We carried out a grant funding audit to support the GLA's final claim to the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy for the grants they have received for the London Economic Action Partnership. This involved testing a sample of transactions to ensure that they were in accordance with the terms of the grant agreement. We concluded that the claims made were for eligible expenditure in accordance with the grant offer and agreement, and that all of the costs had been correctly incurred within the agreed funding period. That's it.
Well, that sounds good news. I don't know whether anybody had any questions on that. No. So on that excellent news, we will conclude item 9, our internal audit reports. Thank you very much, everyone in person and remotely who has joined us on that. Can I ask then the panel to note the contents of the recent internal audit reports attached to the report as appendices 1 to 9? Excellent, well noted. That brings us to item 10, which is the Corporate Risk Register. Can I ask the panel to note the Corporate Risk Register, and are there any points on it that members wish office to consider ahead of the next 6-monthly refresh and update? Nothing specific, okay. And then can I also ask members to note the refreshed risk management framework, and likewise whether there are any points members wish officers to consider on that ahead of the next policy review? Noted, excellent. Brings us to item 11, the draft annual governance statement 2022-23. Do members have any questions or comments on that item? Nope. Okay. Item 12 is the monitoring of expenses and taxable benefits for the mayor, elected members and senior staff. Can we note the taxable benefits and expenses incurred during the period April to May 2020, during 22-23 and the period from April to May 2023? Any questions, comments, observations? Nope. Brings us to item 13, the audit panel work programme. Can I ask the panel to note the panel's work programme? Noted. Excellent. Item 14, the date of the next meeting, which is scheduled for 2 p.m. on Thursday, the 19th of October, here in the chamber in City Hall. Item 15, any other business which is urgent. I have been notified of none, and therefore I shall declare this meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority.